Committee will be in order, and thank you very much. We're here today to consider three bills, H.R. 2410, H.R. 2231, and H.R. 1613. As each of you know, the Rules Committee is made up of a membership of people who, like myself, fly in on an afternoon, and so this afternoon we're a little short on members that are available, but by consent with the minority, we are going to move forward, and I'm delighted to see the number of witnesses that we presently have. First, the committee will hear testimony on H.R. 2410, the Agricultural Appropriations Bill. This year's bill totals $19.5 billion in discretionary funds, which is $1.3 billion below the fiscal year 2013 enacted level and $516 million below the President's request for the programs. Chairman Robert Adderholt, my dear friend from Alabama, has led this difficult work of putting together a bipartisan bill that supports the nation's farmers and ranchers while ensuring that our food and drugs are safe. This legislation also smartly helps ensure that the most vulnerable members of our society have access to food. Finally, it enforces oversight and monitoring of all federal spending to reduce waste, eliminate fraud, and protect the American taxpayer. And I want to thank not just the ranking member, Mr. Farr, but also the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Adderholt, for his important work, and I look forward to hearing from his testimony. I'm delighted to have each of you at the Rules Committee today, and I would yield at this time to the ranking member, the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Polis. The gentleman is recognized.
Yes, I want to welcome everybody, and we look forward to hearing the testimony, and I'll yield back.
Thank you very much. We'll now engage the first panel that we have today, and I would welcome the gentleman, the subcommittee chairman on appropriations, the gentleman, Mr. Adderholt, and also his ranking member, the gentleman from California, Mr. Farr. If you would please feel free to come up and welcome both of you to the Rules Committee. Without objection, we will take whatever you have in writing to the record. I would like to tell you that this room sometimes is difficult to hear from, so I'd encourage you to please turn on the microphone as you speak, and speaking into the microphone helps us. And I'm delighted that both of you are here. We kind of have a rule around here, and that is take all the time you need, then please make your testimony quick. We're trying to, I want you to make your point. You have thought things out. You are bringing thoughts of and ideas before your subcommittee and your committee, and it is very important to us, and yet we recognize sometimes we spend hours and hours in this room, and so with great respect to you and us, we're willing to say that right back to you. I'm delighted that you're here. The gentleman, the subcommittee chairman, the gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Polis. I will be brief. Just want to say that the legislation that we bring, both myself and Ranking Member Farr bring before the committee today represents the work of our subcommittee to support American agriculture, advance agricultural research, provide sufficient funding for our nutrition program, expand rural economic development, and increases efficiency and effectiveness at those agencies we oversee. In addition, the bill helps to ensure a safe and abundant food and drug supply while checking the growth of government using common sense budgeting. As you mentioned in your opening remarks, the discretionary spending for this bill is $19.45 billion. That's $1.3 billion below the FY13 enacted level and $516 million below the President's budget request as scored by CBO. Within the bill and report, we have tried to accommodate more than 3,000 requests that have been received from members of the House. We have made prudent recommendations for the use of resources that American taxpayers have made available to us. This bill ensures that agencies and programs will focus on their core missions. The question would be, is this a perfect bill? It's not a perfect bill. Some say that it spends too little. Some would say that it spends too much. I would say that it strikes a balance between the two while ensuring that our highest priorities in the programs are adequately funded. I want to thank you and the committee for helping to expedite consideration of the bill, and would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Gentlemen, Mr. Farr is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman Sessions, Mr. Nugent, Mr. Hastings, and Mr. Polis. It is a pleasure always to be before this committee with this bill. I don't think people realize that our committee has a responsibility not only for all of USDA and why USDA is so important. Not only is the Ag Department, but it's also the poverty program for America and feeding people through the WIC program and food stamps program. But we also have in our jurisdiction the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, and the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, which does $1 trillion, almost $1 trillion a day of trading. A huge responsibility, and all those budgets are in here. I want to thank my colleague, Chairman Adderholt, and his staff for the gracious management of this bill as it's moved through the process. It's been a little bit contentious because while we have an objection to the inadequate overall allocation, the subcommittee received, as Mr. Adderholt said, $19.4 billion, which is $1.3 billion lower than last year, enacted amount. However, even with that, I do support moving this bill through the process, and I hope that you will adopt an open rule on it. The chairman mentioned that the reductions have been found in this bill. However, I look at a lot of those reductions as loss in investment. It's a tough budget times, and we all have to do tightening of our belts and cut, squeeze, and trim. But when you think about it, what does it do to America's ability to do research and stay ahead of issues affecting agriculture if we don't put the money into it? We don't do that research. What about the technical assistance and programs that do not get delivered? What about the cost of this bill to those who depend on the very programs to survive? For example, here at home, we estimate that some 214,000 eligible applicants would be denied participation in the WIC program, that's the Women, Infant, and Children program, at the funding level in this bill. And even more will be denied breastfeeding counselors. At this level, Congress will be unable to help states eventually save money by converting from paper benefit vouchers to the electronic EDB cards, an important and needed management reform which will allow us to better manage and to better audit purchases. It is doubtful the bill would even cover participation for all eligible individuals without the use of the entire contingency fund. I would also like to point out that an adopted amendment that bars the states from receiving any funds in this bill unless the state is in full compliance with certain eligibility requirements in the SNAP program. That's the old food stamps program now called SNAP. This amendment would be vast. It would have negative consequences on states, their economies, and participants in a wide variety of USDA programs if it becomes law. While compliance with eligibility is a goal we all share, the most recent data shows the program already has an extremely low total error rate, the lowest in its history, 3.8% of overpayment errors, and overpayment errors are less than 3%. And intentionally, while there may be a debate about the administration's proposed reforms to the U.S. food aid program, there is no doubt that failing to adequately fund this program, the Food for Peace program, is a big mistake. The bill cuts the program by $284 million, about 19%, below the enacted 2013, and $275 million below the 2014 request. Based on the average cost per person served in 2012, we believe that more than 7.4 million people would not receive food assistance from the United States as a result of the House funding level. This bill continues efforts to prevent the Commodity Futures Trading Commission from doing the vital work to provide transparency and competition in markets, most certainly for farmers, ranchers, and small businesses that use these markets, and protection of taxpayers from having to pay for future bailouts. The bill funds the agency at $194.5 million, which is $10.7 million below 2013 base. And the Republican bills use the $120 million below the 2014 request. And further, I do not see why the bill should carry language related to the Dodd-Frank that is already considered as authorization bill that passed the House just 2 days before the full committee considered this bill. This unnecessary provision will only complicate consideration of the bill as it goes forward. Lastly, we in Congress need to restore people's confidence in our ability to govern, to regulate Wall Street, and to benefit Main Street. It shouldn't turn a blind eye on the needs of our own constituents who expect Americans' continued leadership as a global leader in food and fiber production. I'd like to thank the chairman, I'd like to thank my colleague, Chairman Adderholt, who made a really good effort in crafting this bill with a really tough allocation that he was given. And I support this rule and look forward to continuing to work with him as we move this bill through the process. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Farr, thank you very much. The opportunity that you and Mr. Adderholt have to come before the committee is important to us. As you know, we had a vigorous discussion of policy of the Farm Bill last week, and while each of us got a heavy dose of understanding some things we may or may not have understood before, it enabled us the opportunity to see firsthand the types of issues that are before you, the importance of this country, not just of the men and women who are engaged in agriculture, but really the important aspect of the policy, whether it be food stamps or whether it be policies that keep people alive and, quite honestly, making sure they'll stay on the farm to produce the things that the breadbasket of the world needs from America. So I am delighted that you're here and would welcome you not only to us, but say thank you. Thank you for the hard work that both of you have done to work together to be here today, and I'm delighted that you're doing that. Gentlemen, Chairman Cole's recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I've got the privilege of listening to my good friends in appropriations discuss this issue at length, so I have no questions.
Thank you very much, Gentleman Yields. Mrs. Slaughter.
Yes. Welcome, Mr. Filner, Mr. Adderholt, to the committee this afternoon. And if you would indulge me a moment, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce two of our guests.
Well, I hope maybe a regular visitor, too, you'd reinforce.
You mean Bob Slaughter?
I do mean the great Bob Slaughter. I saw the great Bob Slaughter walk in here.
The great Bob Slaughter.
He was rather sheepishly looking for you. I think he looked like a guy that was looking for his beautiful young bride.
No, he was looking for that woman who should have been up here 10 minutes ago.
Oh, is that what he was looking for?
That's what he was.
All right. Well, let that Bob Slaughter, let's recognize
Okay.
him. Bob, thank you for being here today.
Well, I'd like to introduce Mr. and Mrs. Hoffman, who are visiting Washington from Raleigh. They are the parents of Dr. Sherry Hoffman, who is my legislative director.
Oh.
And we are very proud of her, as I'm sure are they.
Mr. and Ms. Hoffman, welcome, and we're delighted that you're here with us today. Thank you very much.
And, of course, Bob Slaughter.
Oh, of course. Well, the great Bob Slaughter.
He sure is.
I don't know whether he is at home or not, but he darn sure is up
he's
here.
Okay, but I have no questions of these gentlemen, but thank you.
Thank you very much, and welcome to each of you. Gentlemen, Mr. Woodall is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate particularly you, Mr. Farr, talking about your support of the process and moving something forward, even though you don't agree with where it landed, that folks did the best they could with what they had to work with, and we ought to have a vote at the end of the day and see where we go. I happen to agree with you about investment. I'm terribly concerned that we're erring on the side of consumption and investments getting the short end of that stick. I don't have the burden you all have trying to appropriate there, but I see those things as intention. I guess if the pie was much larger, you could have investment and you could have subsidies of consumption. But in a smaller pie, where we seem to prefer continuing to fund those accounts that I would call consumption accounts over those accounts I would call investment accounts. Do you see a preference for one kind of spending over the other as folks try to grapple with these low 302B numbers?
Thank you for the question. I think this nation and its Congresses before us has given us a duty to be responsible for people in need, particularly people that are hungry. And we've learned that the ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I think that's an investment in people. Certainly, this program, which affects the spending on WIC, women, infant, and children, we know that giving women who are pregnant the right kinds of nutrition and learning how to have a nutritional practice, not only for themselves but for their newborns, and then to keep those children on fresh fruits and vegetables and wholesome nutrition food for a couple of years is a very sound investment, particularly after we've been through this healthcare debate and the cost of healthcare in America, and realizing that one of our biggest problems, I think it was declared over the weekend, that the number one health risk in America is obesity. And that is something where you learn at an early age to eat the proper foods and avoid that, and all the consequences that come with it. So I don't think it's a choice of one or the other. One is about science, and one is about people, and I think both work together to make sure that we use smart science to keep people healthy and productive.
While there's certainly an opportunity for those things to work in tandem, as you said, doing that investment on the front end often saves us some of those consumption dollars on the back end. I would just say if there are ever any opportunities where you see that coming along the track, and you need a good young, rock solid, hardcore Republican to be your bipartisan co-sponsor on those things, I hope you'll come and knock on my door. And to you, Chairman Adderholt, I was a young staffer when you showed up here as a freshman member, and to see you with a gavel in your hand doing this business that I would not wish on my enemies back home, and doing it with such success. People ask me what it's like to serve in Congress, and I said it's less about the institution; it's more about who the folks are as individuals. And I sometimes tell them your story as an example of folks who came for all the right reasons and have been doing those things that need to be done, hard or not. And I just want you to know I'm grateful for your service and your friendship. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. Yields this time. I used to have people ask me a lot about what it's like to serve in the Congress, and I can tell you the gentleman, Mr. Woodall, got a haircut as I did this weekend, and I now get people to tell me, my barber for about 45 minutes, what he thinks about my service. And so, nice haircut there, Rob. Well, you sound a lot like Robert Adderholt. But whatever it is, I'm sure it's an hour long, whatever it is. Mine was a very long haircut this week, or it seemed to take a...
Will the gentleman yield for a compliment?
Yes, sir.
Our chair has the best hair on the committee.
Well,
I yield
Good
back.
hair.
thank you very much.
And we'll tell anybody that.
I will.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The gentleman did not receive a second on that. The motion does not pass. Gentleman, Mr. Hastings, Judge Hastings
Thank
recognized.
you very much, Mr. Chairman. And since I cut my own hair, I guess I'll leave this hair business alone. I thank Mr. Adderholt and Mr. Farr, and quite frankly, I can honestly say two of my best friends in Congress and people that I have immense respect for. And I say to my colleague, the chairman of this committee, Mr. Adderholt, my regrets for not being able to go with you to Istanbul on Friday. Some of you may or may not know that Robert Adderholt is Vice President of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. And there are extraordinary undertakings that go on that are related to us in many ways with now 57 countries, including Russia. And I'm delighted that he's going to be able to go. Ms. Slaughter is a member of that commission, and very occasionally she and I and the great Bob Slaughter get a chance to travel to their meeting in Istanbul, and you have my best wishes that there will be stability there when you arrive. I saw President Grosrook's statement. I thought it was a little bit strong going into Istanbul. If you see him, tell him I said so. But nevertheless, I do appreciate both of you. I know you had hard work to do. I don't have any questions. I am genuinely concerned about the shortages that are no fault of your own under the aegis of the 302B process. You would have had more money for WIC and for food safety and for those matters that concern us all, be they consumption or investment under this particular program. Had the defense 302B not overshot itself beyond reason, in my judgment, knowing full well that that's not going to sustain itself. It will be interesting to see how the rest of the process plays out with everybody else having the strain and with defense not having the strain. Somewhere along the line, I consider investing in our children just as important as investing in bombs, and somehow or another we'll get there one day. But good luck to you on your trip overseas, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and I thank the former president of the OSCE for your service as well.
Gentleman yields his time, and thank you very much. The gentleman, Mr. Nugent, recognized. Gentleman has no question. Gentleman from Colorado. No questions. Gentleman has no questions. Dr. Burgess, no questions.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I just got the statement of the administrative policy. If I ask unanimous consent to put it in the record.
Without objection.
And summarize just for a moment, the White House mourns the fact that we have no budget. Since 2 months have passed since deadline for action, Congress has yet to appoint conferees and agree on the budget resolution. And prior to consideration of the appropriations bills, we should complete an appropriate framework for all the appropriations bills that support recovery and enable sufficient investments in education, infrastructure, innovation, and national security for our economy to compete in the future. As such, the President's senior advisors would recommend he veto H. 2420 and any other legislation that implements the House Republican budget framework. So I thank you for permission to put it in record.
Thank you very much. Further discussion before we excuse this panel. Seeing none, I want to thank both of you. Your eloquence and testimony to get this properly done has been well received by this committee. We thank you for your hard work and thoughtfulness, and we would expect to move forward on this. This panel is now excused. Just so we're all aware, that statement is now being made available to all committee members. Seeing no further members that seek to be heard on this H.R. 2410, this now closes the this section of the hearing. The committee now will consider 2 bills that will help ensure that our nation is properly exploring and developing our offshore energy resources. Here to testify today is the young gentleman from South Carolina, Congressman Jeff Duncan, who is the author of H.R. 1613 and who will be testifying on both bills as a member of the Natural Resources Committee. Joining him is Congressman, my dear friend, Pete DeFazio from Oregon, who is here on behalf of Ranking Member Markey, who is busy today. H.R. 2231, the Offshore Energy and Jobs Act, would put an end to the President's no new drilling policies by requiring the administration to implement a new 5-year leasing plan in areas with the greatest oil and natural reserves off our coastline. The President's anti-drilling policies have cost our nation not only jobs, forfeited revenue that could be used to pay down our national debt, and employ people and put the cost of energy to a more affordable range, with the knowledge that energy costs have doubled under President Obama and Democrat policies. We've forfeited revenue that could help us pay for goods and services, education, and a number of other important items. It's also denied access to American oil and natural gas that would lessen our dependence on foreign sources of energy, many of whom are not only not friendly to us, but really not friendly to the world. And this bill will be a vital step in unleashing our vast energy supplies and helping create an estimated 1.2 million jobs. It also includes important reforms that make offshore drilling safer. We also will hear testimony on H.R. 1613, the Outer Continental Shelf Transboundary Hydrocarbon Agreements Authorization Act. This legislation would enact the terms of an agreement the administration made with Mexico that allows the energy production in areas that overlie our maritime boundary in the Gulf of Mexico. As a result, H.R. 1613 provides for the domestic production and extraction by American companies and American workers of these resources. I would welcome Congressman Jeff Duncan and Congressman Pete DeFazio, and I want to thank them for being before us today. They would please feel free to join us. Without objection, we will entertain any thing that they have in writing. Before we get started too far, I also want to recognize, because she arrived after Bob desperately, the young Bob Slaughter, looking for her. I'd like to yield to the gentleman for an opening statement if she would choose to make one. Gentlewoman's recognized. Gentlewoman yields. Listen, thank you very much to both of you for taking time. I know you've been sitting here waiting your turn. Gentleman's now recognized. And the gentleman is also appreciated and thanked. I noticed the chaplain. I noticed the chaplain of the House has walked in just in time to aid and abet the gentleman from South Carolina. So I don't need to say good luck.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for holding this hearing. H.R. 1613 it enacts a February 2012 agreement signed by then U.S. Secretary of State Clinton and Mexican Secretary of Foreign Relations Espinoza on how to explore, develop, and share revenue from the hydrocarbon reservoirs that span across our nation's maritime boundary with Mexico in the Gulf of Mexico. While the agreement itself provides specific guidance to the respective agencies in each government on how to allow for the development of these resources, it must be enacted by Congress as it requires amendments to the Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act. What this legislation does is it lifts a moratorium on exploration and development in a currently unexplored section of the Gulf of Mexico known as the Western Gap. Now, if you can envision with me a maritime border, just like we have a southern border between the United States and Mexico, but out in the Gulf of Mexico, the resources we're talking about lie under that maritime border. This agreement creates a broader legal certainty along the whole U.S.-Mexico maritime border area to foster more American energy development and job creation. The Bureau of Ocean Energy Management estimates this area contains as much as 172 million barrels of oil, 304 billion cubic feet of natural gas. This agreement provides a clear and transparent path for any future transboundary hydrocarbon agreements with other states, ensuring that they are referred to Congress. It ensures that our nation's sovereignty over the U.S. outer continental shelf, and it prevents a potential Dodd-Frank conflict by exempting resource extraction companies from Dodd-Frank reporting requirement only for the development in this area under this agreement. And this ensures that this agreement is not used as a precedent for permitting engagement with Cuba about drilling along the U.S.-Cuba boundary in the Gulf of Mexico. So what we're talking about is the Western Gap, closest to the Yucatan Peninsula in the western Gulf of Mexico. Does not deal with the eastern Gulf of Mexico closer to Cuba. I do have a map if anyone would like to look at that. One thing I will note, Mr. Chairman, is the State Department was involved in the crafting of the agreement, and on its website it encourages the timely passage of this legislation. And with that, I'll yield back the balance of my time on H.R. 1613.
Thank you, gentleman. Mr. Fazio, gentleman from Oregon, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your kind introduction. Mr. Chairman, there is substantial agreement on 1613, except for the one provision that would waive a requirement of the Securities Act, which was amended by the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform Act, which would allow the oil companies engaged in this Western Gap area to make undisclosed payments to the government of Mexico. The Reform Act felt that it was in the interest of both the shareholders and the citizens, and to prevent any appearance of impropriety in dealing with foreign nations, that any such required payments would be disclosed. I don't see that it would put any company at a particular disadvantage. Their shareholders would probably like to know how much they paid to enter into these agreements, and we would suggest that this bill could have been passed today under suspension of the rules if that provision wasn't in the bill. However, we find ourselves here and petitioning for a rule, and that is our major concern with the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate both these gentlemen not only working together on this, but appearing and taking time to do that. I have no questions. Gentleman, Chairman Culp.
Just a quick comment, Mr. Chairman. Again, welcome the gentleman and thank them for working together in such a bipartisan fashion. I'm thrilled to actually see a bill show up here that doesn't have an immediate veto threat from the White House. Usually it'd be nice if they just waited to see how we amended it, treated it, what the Senate did with it. But it's nice to see one that's got the blessing from the get-go. So thank you, gentlemen, for your good work.
Thank you, Chairman. Mrs. Slaughter.
Thank you. I just bring that very statement from the administration. They do support the goals of 1613. They think that we should have an agreement between the United States of America and the Mexican state. However, they can't support H.R. 1613 because of the unnecessary extraneous provisions. And most significantly, they strongly object to what Mr. Fazio was talking about. And that's exempting actions taken by public companies in accordance with transparent hydrocarbon agreements from requirements under Section 1504 of the Dodd-Frank Act and the Securities and Exchange Commission's Natural Resources Extraction Disclosure Rule. And I think that's quite understandable that he would feel that way, and I ask unanimous consent to put this in the record, and in its present form, he will veto it. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right. Appreciate the comments and the SAP that will be engaged and entered in the record. Appreciate the gentleman. Gentleman, Mr. Woodall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just ask Mr. Duncan, that's a little bit of a surprise to me, too, given that the way that you have been working on this bill across the aisle, trying to implement the Secretary's agreements. Are you surprised by the veto threat, or would you say that that's been out there for a while?
The agreement hammered out between the Secretary Clinton and foreign officer from Mexico, Espinoza, had language in it that was in direct conflict with Dodd-Frank. This affirms that language, and it would allow the companies to actually do the exploration out there without fear of having to disclose proprietary information. We support the language in the agreement, in the bill, that implements the agreement, and just because we think it's the right thing to do for energy production and American national security and energy security.
The alternative, Mr. DeFazio, is what? If we don't craft language and implement the agreement as the agreement was made, even though that agreement is contravenes Dodd-Frank, what then is our other alternative?
Well, I expect we'll find that out after the bill goes to the Senate, and I would expect it would be the identical bill without this specific exemption for Mexico. The law would still apply to all other countries, and we certainly have a close relationship with Mexico. On the other hand, we know from time to time there are problems with what's called mordida and things like that in Mexico. And, to give them a specific exemption, I think is problematic. I would assume the Mexicans would quickly accede, because this was, I believe, I'm told, put in by the requests of the, American companies as opposed to being insisted upon by Mexico. So I think in the end we'd get it done. It'll just take a little longer.
This was put in by the Department of State at the request of American companies?
I'm not aware if it was put in at the request of the Department of State or if it was negotiated in by Mexico. Those were closed-door meetings. This is similar to Fast Track, which we'll be confronting in the not-too-distant future, where Congress cedes all its legislative authority to the executive branch and allows them to bring forward take-it-or-leave-it agreements, none of which I've ever voted for personally.
I'm feeling a warm sense of cooperation there when we start talking about ceding legislative authority. Mr. Duncan.
One thing to point out is that the Dodd-Frank provision is for payments to foreign governments. And the reason I suspect that language was put in there because oftentimes to do business in a foreign country, you have to buy permits and licenses and other things, and those payments need to be disclosed. But let's keep in mind what I mentioned earlier is a maritime border and the resources underneath the border. They're half owned by Mexico and half owned by the United States. American energy companies would be extracting those resources and would have to pay the Mexican government their fair share, which is 50% of the resource. By the same token, Mexican companies, Pemex primarily, producing resources there, would pay the United States for their share of those royalties. So that's the reason it should be a waiver, and that's the reason I believe the language was put in the agreement, because we're paying Mexico their portion of the money.
But to be clear, to the extent that folks in this House may disagree on that provision, it's not that we disagree with one another about that provision. It's that folks disagree with then Secretary Clinton and her agreement to that position. This isn't a House position that we're promulgating. We're simply promulgating the position agreed to by then Secretary of State.
The Obama administration's language in the agreement. Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Fazio.
I am not an expert on this. I'm standing in for the ranking member and the ranking member of this particular subcommittee, but staff has given me a note, and they are always, in most cases, more knowledgeable than members, and they say that the agreement does not contravene Dodd-Frank, and that we made clear from day one that the waiver would be a problem, and since the Obama administration is now threatening a veto, I think that this is a little bit deeper than is being displayed here, and they also said they would apply to future agreements, and we're about to enter into some significant disputes with Russia over, newly potentially available resources in the Arctic region, and this would apparently also apply to that. And I really wouldn't want to see us entering into agreements with the Russian government where there isn't full disclosure of, what kind of money is being required, shall we say nicely.
Yeah. Well, I thank the chairman for his work, and thank Mr. Fazio for doing that stand-in duty. It's tough duty to come before the Rules Committee on a stand-in basis, Mr. Fazio. I appreciate you doing that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman, Judge Hastings recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, let me see, can I simplify the controversy? It may never occur that an oil or gas company would, beyond the normal disclosure requirements set forth in Dodd-Frank, need or use a provision to pay a foreign government in a secret manner. But the simple fact of the matter is the bill, the amendment as offered, became a poison pill largely for the reason that oil and gas companies could, whether they did or not is another question, make secret payments to foreign governments. And therein lies a part of the problem. Mr. Chairman, I'll have an awful lot to say about this. I believe I'm going to be managing the rule on tomorrow, and I think everybody pretty much that deals in Congress knows my overall attitude regarding offshore drilling. I compliment the gentlemen and their committee for the work on this effort. I only ask Mr. Duncan to be mindful that after the BP oil spill, a commission was formulated, and they gave Congress a D+, that commission did, in our response to the BP oil spill. And as we go forward in talking about offshore drilling, I hope that at the very least, and I'm not certain, I believe I am certain that this measure does not address safety concerns, at least associated with spills, the way the commission recommended that we do. And I would hope in the future that we would undertake to do that. I don't know whether, Mr. Duncan, you care to respond or need to, but my attitude is that when we are doing this offshore drilling, if we didn't learn anything from BP, we ain't ever going to learn nothing.
Gentleman yields his time. I see no further member. I'm sorry, Mr. Post. I see no further member that seeks further discussion on the subject. Thank you very much. If you'll please hold your positions, we'll now move on to H.R. 2231, Offshore Energy and Jobs Act, and which is a separate subject, and I appreciate both of you continuing to stay around, and the gentleman from South Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here on behalf of Chairman Doc Hastings, who was delayed with flights coming across the country today. So my comments are a reflection of his comments, and I do believe we have a statement for the record from Chairman Hastings directly. But H.R. 2231, the Offshore Energy and Jobs Act, would expand U.S. offshore energy production in order to create over 1 million new American jobs, lower energy prices, and grow our economy and strengthen our national security. That's really what it's about: jobs, energy security, and national security. The bill removes federal government barriers that block production of our own U.S. energy resources. President Obama has effectively reimposed an offshore drilling moratorium and imposed a lease plan that keeps 85% of our offshore areas off limits to American energy production. A report by the Nonpartisan Congressional Research Service confirms that the 15 lease sales in President Obama's 5-year plan represent the lowest number of lease sales ever offered in a plan since the process began in 1980. In stark contrast to President Obama's No New Drilling, No New Jobs plan, H.R. 2231 proposes a drill smart job creation plan that will require the administration to move forward with new offshore energy production in areas containing the most oil and natural gas resources, including the Atlantic coast and the Pacific coast. It also requires the Secretary of the Interior to conduct oil and natural gas lease sales that have been delayed or canceled by the Obama administration and implements a fair and equitable revenue sharing program for all coastal states. H.R. 2231 also builds on the Interior Department's reorganization of its offshore energy agencies by writing reforms into law and further enhancing the accountability, efficiency, safety, and ethical standards of offshore energy operations. These reforms will allow for the robust and safe production of our nation's offshore energy resources. H.R. 2231 would generate approximately $1.5 billion in new revenue over 10 years, according to the CBO, and could create up to 1.2 million jobs long term. That's my opening statement, Mr. Chairman, and with that, I'll yield back.
Thank you very much. Did you reference that you did have a statement from the gentleman, Chairman of the committee?
That was my understanding, and I don't see the committee staff member here, but if it comes in, we'll make sure
I would advise the gentleman that he would need to approach a member of the committee to have that entered to the record if you so choose to do that. Thank you very much. We'll engage yours or enter yours without objection. Gentleman from Oregon is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, if this package or accumulated bill sounds familiar, it is. We voted on all or part of this legislation 5 times in the last Congress, and it never came before the United States Senate, and I really expect it won't be much different this time around, but nonetheless it's before us. There's an interesting new provision which is making the leasing mandatory on the part of the administration, and that is based on an arbitrary threshold based on a 2006 Department of Interior resource assessment, i.e. if it meets a threshold standard in the DOI assessment, that area must be leased. It would require leasing in the North Atlantic, Mid-Atlantic, off the coast of Virginia, South Atlantic, off the coast of South Carolina, off the coast of Southern California. It would add new leases in the Chukchi Sea, Beaufort Sea, North Aleutian Basin, and there actually, because of, we believe, some fuzzy drafting, it also appears to open up Northern and Central California, not just the one lease area in Southern California. A number of amendments, I would ask the indulgence of the committee, a number of amendments have been filed by Democrats to protect sensitive areas from offshore leasing. I have offered an amendment, which I offered in committee, on Bristol Bay, which supports a totally sustainable, annually renewable $2 billion a year fishing industry. There will be another amendment, which I co-sponsored with 10 West Coast members for the coasts of California, Oregon, and Washington in compliance with the desire of the governors and the legislatures of those states. Then a third amendment, and I'm pleased the Chair mentioned this in his opening remarks, which is maximizing revenue to the federal government. I'm offering an amendment to say that all revenues collected from these leases would go to the Treasury as long as the government runs a budget deficit, and revenue sharing with the states would not start from any new leases under this program until such a time as we do not have a deficit. And there are also other issues, I believe, that the gentleman from Florida referenced regarding the lack of new safety reforms, the obsolete oil liability cap of $75 million, which, a small commercial vessel could exceed $75 million in damage, let alone one of these leases. And then finally, Mr. Chairman, I was at this hearing and participated, and I directed a question to the gentleman from the American Petroleum Institute, and and I pointed out that there are 5,484 leases in the OCS that are currently not producing. They cover more than 30 million acres, or 85% of the total acreage available for leasing. And in the Gulf of Mexico alone, and these leases go beyond the Gulf of Mexico, the Interior Department estimated last year that the unused, undeveloped leases contained nearly 18 billion, with a B, barrels of economically recoverable oil and nearly 50 trillion, with a T, cubic feet of natural gas. More than anyone in their wildest dreams think is available drilling on the east and west coasts of the United States. So, Mr. Chairman, I would ask the committee to make all or some of the amendments in order as we proceed through this legislation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Appreciate the feedback from both of you, and once again, the information that you both bring based upon your intensive work, not only on the committee, but the interest that you bring to us is very relevant and important for us as we talk about not only the energy needs of this great nation, but also how we're going to solve the problems of jobs, job creation, investment, and making sure that energy is available and productive for the future of this great nation. I appreciate your testimony. Gentlemen, Chairman Cole.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to say I'm going to refrain from speculating about the administration anymore, having done so last time, and been shocked that they wouldn't support a agreement that their own Secretary of State had negotiated, but I'll just let them speak for themselves from now on. I do want to make this point to my friend from Oregon, Mr. DeFazio, and I'll make the point, but also please respond if you care to. I do, and I don't come from a coastal state. I do come from an energy-producing state. But I do find the arguments that people in the states along the coast that participate in production of energy pretty compelling when they say, we host the industry. I know how much expense falls back on those states in terms of roads, in terms of schools for kids that are involved in families there. They pay an enormous amount of the cost of recovery through their public funds. And to not share some of that income, I would, by the way, feel the same way about wind power off the Northeast, which I know is an emerging industry. I think when states go to considerable expense to help host an industry, that they ought to get some portion of that revenue back, and particularly in cases like, let's take our friends in Louisiana, where they've got coastal damage and risk and what have you, that we ought to take that into account when we talk about where the revenue goes. Because, again, not much of that expense for providing the platform falls on the federal government, or not as much. So, anyway, I just offer that as an observation, but I appreciate the fact that, Mr. Duncan, you're trying to encourage energy independence here. I think this is recoverable reserve. I think we know how to do it safely. I certainly know that problems occasionally occur, and when they do, we learn something. We try to get better at it, but we get over half of our petroleum from over a quarter of our petroleum from the Gulf of Mexico right now. And the idea that we would slow down or shut down recoveries in these areas or other coastal areas where we have reserves, I think is a vast mistake. It puts us at risk blackmail from countries overseas that will extort a higher price from us or even use the product politically. So we're far better off to be as independent as we possibly can. This legislation, I think, moves us in that direction. I appreciate your efforts and your committee's efforts in bringing it forward. I certainly would yield to my friend.
Well, this would not impact any of the 5,484 leases on the OCS now that are not producing. Those would go under the normal revenue sharing agreements. And 26 million of those acres are developed. I have spent a good deal of time. I did a 2-day trip with former Chairman Tozman down to see the issues and the problems in Louisiana, and they do have very significant problems with this as well before Macondo in terms of abandoned channels and areas that are causing erosion where they need to plug them up and do things like that. And we have actually, after Macondo, been quite generous in helping the state deal with some of those issues, and I recognize that. But this is to open up a whole additional set of areas before these others are meaningfully developed. And that raises concern. I I could hear myself, so I've got a cold, but I didn't know the microphone. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, the microphone wasn't on. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for your question. You know, just because an area, a grid square, is leased in the Gulf of Mexico does not mean that it has recoverable resources. If someone bids on a lease for the opportunity to go out there and explore and hopefully produce, a lot of the areas that the gentleman talking about just aren't recoverable resources, and it's like having a full cup and an empty cup, and you're not going to produce, you're not going to find anything on the empty cup. We believe off the coast of South Carolina and believe off the coast of Virginia they are recoverable resources. Natural gas in my state primarily is what is anticipated. But one thing that the states that want to be involved in this hope to see is revenue sharing like exhibited in Alaska and off the Gulf of Mexico. That's why revenue sharing is there. And as a trickle down to that, offshore drilling is just the first domino. The jobs that are created by the guys that are actually doing the exploration and production are small by comparison to the number of jobs onshore that support offshore industries, whether it's the supply vessels or if it's the pipe welders and pipe fitters and the truck mechanics and the restaurants where they eat and the churches where they tithe and the United Ways where they contribute. The first domino is to open up the area, produce American energy, meet our national security needs by being energy independent, and then create those jobs, not just in the oil and natural gas industry, but all across the spectrum that services that and benefits the small communities of all of our states. And I think about the state of Wyoming receives about $1 billion a year in revenue sharing from production on federal land onshore. The states like Virginia and South Carolina and California and others that would take advantage of this type of legislation could experience a fraction of that. But a fraction will go a long ways to helping those states that are struggling economically, just like we are as a nation. So I would urge swift passage of this. I appreciate the Rules Committee listening, and I appreciate your questions, sir.
Well, I appreciate your comments. I particularly appreciate you making the point about the difference between productive leases and unproductive leases. That's something that I think is quite often lost. There's a lot of money spent on leases that are never going to produce. And you simply do that to reserve the right to explore and to actually make an investment. So the idea that people are sitting on billions of barrels of reserve without trying to exploit them, believe me, if you're leasing them, you want to bring them into production if they've got productive capacity, and you can do that. So I appreciate that point. I appreciate very much, look, I admire people in these states that are willing to have this activity take place off their shores. I think that's a contribution to the energy security of the country. And again, I think they ought to get, a reasonable percentage of that revenue back to help them offset the costs that are associated always with production and economic growth. As you rightly point out, we certainly do it on federal lands inside the continental United States. We should do it to those states that are providing the platforms for exploration and production offshore. With that, I yield back.
Thank you very much. Gentleman Chairman yields back. Mrs. Slaughter.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. DeFazio, would you repeat for my benefit the number of acreage that's been cleared for drilling that's never been touched?
Thank you, Madam Ranking Member. 5,484 leases, 30 million acres, and the estimates of the Energy Information Administration are that these unused leases contain nearly 18 billion barrels of oil, 50 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. Now, one would say, why would anyone sit on it? Well, the holding costs are virtually nothing. And as we see, the long-term trend of oil is up and natural gas right now is down. So I can see why a company would want to just sit on a potentially productive lease, because there's virtually no cost to doing that. We have attempted to pass legislation in the past to have escalating costs over time when they leave these leases untouched, and then they come in and they ask to lease more areas. I mean, there is certainly a very high motivation to sit. I mean, no one ever thinks the price of oil is going to go down dramatically in the future.
Well, thank you. That was really quite startling to me to find that there was that much and they were asking for more. Let me give the administration's policy. Everybody hang on here. The administration strongly opposes H.R. 2231. The bill would undermine the targeted, science-based, and regionally tailored offshore development strategy that the American people and the states have helped develop. The administration is committed to promoting safe and responsible domestic oil and gas development as part of an all-of-the-above energy strategy to increase domestic production and reduce dependence on foreign oil. Since this president took office, America's dependence on foreign oil has decreased every year, and domestic oil and natural gas production has risen every year. In 2012, American oil production reached the highest level in 2 decades. That's pretty remarkable. And natural gas production reached an all-time high. If presented with this bill in its present form, the senior advisors would recommend a veto. Thank you.
Gentleman yields time. Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have any questions on the bill. I was reading exactly what my friend from New York was reading in the Statement of Administration Policy, that since the president took office, America's dependence on foreign oil has decreased every year, and domestic oil and natural gas production has risen every year. And having just gotten back from a 4-day visit back home, where folks are just so discouraged with what they would really call a lack of trust in Washington, D.C. I point to a statement like that. I've been here the same 2.5 years that you've been here, Mr. Duncan, and I can't think of one thing, not one thing, that this president and his administration has done to promote the development of these resources on federal lands. Now, you serve on a committee of jurisdiction. I know this is you're sitting in for Chairman Hastings, but can you, if he's not claiming credit for the reduction in dependence on foreign oil, if he's not claiming credit for the increased production of resources here on American soil, it sure sounds like it. What has the administration done to help achieve these ends?
Thank you, gentleman from Georgia. It's like the rooster taking credit for the sunrise. I don't disagree that oil and natural gas production is up onshore, but it's happening on state and private land in places like the Bakken in North Dakota. Oil production, natural gas production on state and private land is going out the roof because they're free from all the restricting government regulations and off-limit policies of this administration. We're exploring in North Dakota where when you get off an airplane, they give you a job whether you need one or not. Yeah. Because energy production is going gangbusters. But you know what? The Bakken isn't just reserved for the state of North Dakota. It actually flows up under the state of Montana as well, but mostly under federal land. And guess what? There's no energy production happening over there on the other side of the artificial thing called a state line. But the Bakken's over there, the oil and natural gas is over there, primarily oil in the Bakken Shale, and it's not happening because it's on federal land. It is happening where the administration, prior to the Obama administration, said we're going to let the states go after that. And it's happening on state and private land in spite of government policies.
I certainly understand that reasonable people can disagree about the development of our natural resources here, and I'm glad that we do. But when I see statements like this, combined with the information that you've shared from your 2.5 years on the Committee of Jurisdiction, I do think that does a lot to undermine the confidence of folks in the discussions that we have on capital. If you don't want to develop oil on federal lands, say I don't want to develop resources on federal lands, and be candid, and from what I have seen, the President has been very candid about his desire not to seek those resources, but you would not notice that reading the Statement of Administration Policy, and that's disappointing. I expect more. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman, Judge Hastings, recognized.
Well, I will tell my friend from Georgia if he wants to come forward to just in the last 4 hours, the President made a speech on what he intends on climate change. And while it is not particularly relevant or germane to today's discussion, the President just happens to be one person in this Washington environment that our people back home are not satisfied with. This institution, the Congress, the House of Representatives, has, if you believe the polls, a 10% rating. And that's not just my Republican colleagues. That's all of us that these folk at home are dissatisfied with, and that's largely for the reason that by our own admission, we are dysfunctional, and by our own actions, we are obviously not doing very much. But let me offer a word of caution. It's very easy to point out that someone is ineffective and unable to do things when you set a path to obstruct everything that the person tries to do. My friends on the Republican side have had a mantra for the entirety of this president's administration, allowing, among other things, every imaginable kind of notion about his inability to perform, and then setting a stage and having no less an authority than the majority leader of the United States Senate say his objective is to make sure that he's a one-term president. He didn't do that. But the one thing that they have been able to do in the United States Senate with those arcane rules is to obstruct every measure offered by this administration that may very well have done something positive if given an opportunity to do so. You keep downgrading somebody, and pretty soon you're downgrading yourself. I just offer that for your consideration.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much. As a Texan, I well understand that in the prior administration. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
I always love following the gentleman from Georgia because we agree on so many things, probably because we're pretty conservative. And I agree with him in the statement, particularly the statement that the President put out as it relates to energy production in the United States, when in fact he wasn't responsible for, I don't believe, any of it, at least any of the increase. It's pretty clear where he stands on that, and particularly from his speech today in regards to energy that America sits on, energy that could come from Canada. It's pretty clear about where he stands on that, because talking about obstruction, let's come up with another rule as to how we can stop North American energy from flowing into America. But getting back to this bill, and Mr. Hastings and I both live, and Mr. Webster live in a coastal state, and I'm interested in regards to what this bill does to make it safer, or does it do anything to make it safer in regards to drilling in our coastal waters?
Well, the first thing it does is it reorganizes and implements some of the reorganization through the old MMS under the Department of Interior into 3 new sub-agencies. So the wording from the bill formally abolishes the MMS, Minerals Management Service, agency formerly responsible for all offshore energy leasing, planning, safety, revenue collection, and creates 3 separate distinct agencies to handle offshore energy operations. The first one is the Bureau of Ocean Energy, responsible for the planning, leasing, and environmental work associated with offshore energy production. The second one would be the Ocean Energy Safety Service, or OESS. It's responsible for permitting, safety, and inspections. So it's an agency that's focused on the permitting, safety, and inspections solely. And then it creates the Office of Natural Resources Revenue, responsible for all royalty and revenue collection. So it's broken that MMS into 3 components so that they can focus on the things that are concerning to us, and one of those being the safety and regulations. We do have some of the most sound and strict safety regulations for offshore drilling of any other country in the world. And that's in the post-Horizon days. We get that. But this would allow the OESS, or the Ocean Energy Safety Service, to focus on making sure that those companies are compliant.
Well, MMS did not do such a great job, obviously, in keeping an eye on what was going on in the drilling. And I commend this bill for having a specific organization that is held accountable and responsible for the safety of drilling offshore, protect our beaches, protect our fishing, to protect all the things reasons why we moved to Florida, the reasons why people live along the coastal areas, and others. So I commend you for putting that in this piece of legislation, to have an agency that is actually accountable to make sure that the safety procedures are in place and that they have oversight in regards to safety. So I thank you very much. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentleman, Mr. Webster. Gentleman, Dr. Burgess.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to amplify the comments made by the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Woodall. Our area of North Texas, of course, has the Barnett Shale, and it has been a producer for the last 15 years. Further south in Texas, you have the Eagle Ford Shale, and the Texas economy has certainly prospered as a result of those two finds, and certainly to me could be instructive to the rest of the country. If you want to find a way out of the soft economy and the recession, certainly the correct management of your minerals and your manufacturing can lead the way. I sat for 2 terms on the Joint Economic Committee, received the numbers, the employment numbers on the first Friday of every month, and it was always the manufacturing sector, which contained the oil, gas, and timber numbers, that were leading the way, even at a time when our country was losing jobs at a rather astonishing pace. So the fact that these developments have occurred on state and private lands, I think, is instructive. There perhaps is a model to be followed with federal lands as well. And I thank the gentleman for bringing the bill to us today, and I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you much. Gentleman yields back his time. I want to thank both of you for being here. There's no doubt in my mind that the ability that our country to produce our own resources, energy, not only makes it cost effective, but helps the job circumstance. And I note that this country still has a tremendous economic disadvantage, as it has been from our past, where millions of people are going paycheck to paycheck. Jobs are not available, unemployment at a high rate, and unfortunately, part-time jobs as opposed to full-time jobs and careers are those things that are making themselves present. And I will tell you that being a lifelong Texan, I've seen the energy industry produce not only men and women of substance, but also men and women who can take care of themselves and their families and their communities with a great deal of pride and pride of authorship as it goes with that. And I appreciate the gentleman, Mr. Duncan, not only as a new member of Congress, learning his job, learning it very well, but seeing firsthand, as the gentleman, Mr. DeFazio, has done firsthand, what this industry can, must, and will do for this great country. And I want to thank both of you for your testimony. Both of you are now excused, and thank you very much. Gentlemen from Florida is now recognized to speak about his amendment. Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, in the interest of time, with your permission, I ask unanimous consent to submit my statement that I would make in support of my amendment for the record.
Without objections, the statement is received, and the gentleman is thanked for his amendment. We would now move to another panel that would include the gentlewoman, Ms. Songas. I would ask that she please feel free to come to the table. The gentleman from Louisiana, Dr. Cassidy, would also be encouraged to join this panel. And I do not see anyone else that I know of that is a member that's seeking recognition at this time. On behalf of the committee, we want to thank both of you for appearing before us today with this important discussion. As you have heard me say, your ideas, your hard work on behalf of the things which you support, notwithstanding people back home, is important to this committee. It's important that you be allowed to come to this committee in a process that is fair and open. I think you bring not only debate but ideas that help us as we deliberate to be prepared for that, but also more importantly, as a member of Congress, I believe you're entitled to that opportunity. Without objection, anything you have in writing will be entered into the record. And at this time, I would ask the gentlewoman, Ms. Songas, to lead the testimony. Gentlewoman's recognized.
Well, thank you, Chairman Sessions, and thank you to Ranking Member Slaughter and to the members of the committee for allowing me to speak on behalf of the amendment I am offering to H.R. 2231. More than 3 years after the BP Deepwater Horizon disaster, Congress has yet to enact a single legislative reform to improve the safety of offshore drilling. As we've heard and as we know, domestic oil production, wherever it may occur, is at a 20-year high, and natural gas production is at an all-time high in the United States. With all this activity, I believe we should be making sure that the current oil production boom occurs in a manner that protects workers, coastal communities, and the environment. Now is the time to enhance drilling safety, not weaken it. However, H.R. 2231 would require new, unsafe drilling to take place off beaches in California and every state on the East Coast from Maine to South Carolina, including drilling off my home state of Massachusetts. H.R. 2231 includes none of the key recommendations submitted by the BP Oil Spill Commission to improve drilling safety. In fact, the successor to the BP Spill Commission recently gave Congress a D+ on its legislative response to the spill. This amendment, which I am co-sponsoring with Representatives Grijalva and Castor, requires adoption of additional safety measures before issuing offshore leases. It also doubles the maximum civil penalty to $80,000 per incident per day and to $150,000 per day if the violation constitutes, quote, a threat of harm or damage to life, property, or the marine, coastal, or human environment, unquote. Finally, the amendment allows the Secretary of the Interior to lift the liability cap for damages related to an oil spill. Drilling for oil miles below the Earth's surface in ocean depths of 5,000 feet is an inherently risky undertaking. As such, it is essential that all necessary safety precautions are taken, especially when an accident can hold such dire consequences for our environment and our economy, as we saw with the BP spill. I urge the committee to bring this amendment to the floor for a vote so that we may ensure that key drilling safety reforms recommended after the BP Deepwater Horizon disaster are enacted into law. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank the gentleman very much for testimony. The gentleman from Louisiana, the young doctor, Mr. Cassidy, is recognized.
Thank you. I have two amendments. I'll speak first to the one which will provide equity between states for, I'm sorry, thank you. The one which will, the purpose of which is...
If gentlemen will suspend just a second. Yeah, thank you very much for pulling that closer to you. I thank gentlemen. Gentleman's recognized.
Great, thank you. I have two amendments to offer. The first would create equity and energy revenue sharing between Louisiana and the federal government, equity relative to other states. Let me start off by saying, obviously there's a heck of a lot of activity in the Outer Continental Shelf of the Gulf of Mexico. There is a cap there on what the border states may receive, Texas through Alabama, from that Outer Continental Shelf. That cap is far less than it is for interior states, where it's 50%. On there, that's a 37.5% revenue share with a $500 million cap. Now, Louisiana, I think, has benefited our country tremendously. It has channeled its Mississippi River in order to allow commerce to move back and forth between the heartland and international markets. It has used its wetlands adjacent to that Mississippi River as a staging area for that Outer Continental Shelf development. But in there has been a price to pay. And that price is one in which our wetlands, fed by that Mississippi, which is now channeled, have receded. The canals that have been built to support the OCS activity likewise have hastened the degradation of our land. And so now we are subject to increased vulnerability to hurricanes as well as to flooding. So what this does is it says, listen, we have in the Gulf of Mexico a lot of outer continental shelf drilling activity. Let's allow those states to have an increased amount of that revenue sharing as the interior states do. And in the case of Louisiana, 100% of that money will be used for coastal restoration. There's a little bit of bitterness in Louisiana because we recognize the sacrifice our state has made for the benefit of royalty payments to the federal government, energy security for our country and indeed the world, and yet our coastline is melting away. When we come to the federal government and ask for assistance with coastal restoration, we're told that, wait, beggar thy neighbor, you are getting money for flood insurance and you should pay higher premiums, even though this activity on behalf of the rest of the states is what is causing our problem. So with this, Congress would recognize that, just as it did in the 2006 Gulf of Mexico Energy Security Act, by allowing increased revenue from the development of federal lands in the Outer Continental Shelf to come to the Gulf Coast states. It would increase the cap from $500 million to $1 billion. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a Louisiana state constitutional amendment which would dedicate 100% of this to coastal restoration. By the way, this does not affect the interior states. They would still have their arrangement. And it would not start for 10 years, so the CBO scores this at a zero cost. And just to put this in perspective, and I'll hold this up first for the camera and then for my colleagues, the red mark is the area that Louisiana will lose in land mass over the next 50 years. So if you look at this, this is our state's vulnerability to what is happening because of both the channeling of the Mississippi and the loss of that wetlands in the staging area that is there for the outer continental shelf. This is what we are trying to repair with this increased revenue. Mr. Cole and Mr. Fazio spoke as to the price our state has paid. I can promise you this increases our vulnerability to future hurricanes. If you will, this is money well spent by the federal government in sharing with us to prevent future payments to rebuild our cities which have been affected by hurricanes. Mr. Chairman, I'll entertain any questions.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the feedback from gentlemen and the information that is contained therein. It helps this committee as we look across the board at not only this amendment, but also the policy that ensues. And I know that the gentleman, Chairman of the committee, Mr. Hastings, I hope that you have taken time to update him on this important attribute because, in fact, areas like this, just like in Texas, do need to be protected with the cost share where the state comes and builds back in those attributes to ensure the long-term safety of conservation for the area. And I thank you very much. Gentleman, Chairman Cole's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just the gentleman knows how I feel on this particular issue, and I appreciate the amendment. But in the interest of brevity, I'll just yield back my time.
Thank you very much. Gentleman yields. Gentleman, Mr. McGovern's recognized. Gentleman yields back his time. Gentleman, Mr. Woodall.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have any questions, but I would like to ask that the statement of Chairman Hastings be entered into the record.
Without objection, the gentleman, Chairman's testimony will be entered in the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman, Judge Hastings, no question. Gentleman, Mr. Nugent. Gentleman's Florida, Mr.
I just had a clarification, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Chairman. Doctor, what was the scale on that map you were showing? I mean, how much of that coast how much are you losing from a mile standpoint or?
We're losing 20 miles a year.
20 miles, okay, thank you.
20 miles a year, square land mile. So yes, that's big scale.
Thank you. Go back.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman, Dr. Burgess.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Cassidy, this was the bill that was brought to the floor by then Representative and now your Governor, Bobby Jindal, back in 2006?
So the one he passed in 2006, which bipartisan support went all the way through both chambers, established the 37.5 royalty sharing, which is to begin in 2017, and also, though at the same time there was a cap placed of $500 million. This would raise that cap, same bill, but raise that cap to $1 billion. By the way, this House, on a bipartisan basis, passed a similar amendment by Representative Landry last Congress.
Let me just ask you a question for clarification. I should know the answer, but apparently I don't. Why was the cap even placed in the first place?
I don't know that.
Very well. We can discuss that later. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
Thank you very much. Hearing all questions from the committee, I want to thank both of you very much.
I have one more amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Excuse me, the gentleman from Louisiana is recognized.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Just another amendment related to this 2006 bill. The Secretary of Interior was supposed to put out rules that would provide clarity on the revenue sharing. States cannot actually begin to plan how to use that money until those rules are issued. Although this was passed when Governor Jindal was Representative Jindal about 6 years ago, those rules have still not been promulgated by the Secretary of Interior. So we have an amendment which basically asks the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management to put forward to propose the preliminary rules to allow the Phase 2 implementation of what we call GOMESA, to allow those Gulf Coast states to begin to plan to use that money. And this clarification would be on the timing and methods of disbursement, clarification that rental revenues and user fees are not excluded as qualified revenue, and certainty that other certainties related to this that would allow states to begin to plan on using these dollars.
I thank the gentleman very much. The gentleman now has brought a new amendment forth to the committee that he had not previously spoken of. Are there questions from the committee? Are there questions at all? I have a question. I'll yield myself such time as I may consume. The gentleman has now spoken about this amendment. Would this necessarily help the states to be able to effectively understand and gain agreement with the federal government about what they could spend their money on?
Absolutely.
Presumably, would that be a guidepost for conservation efforts?
Yes.
That would enable and help the states to, okay.
Yeah.
That's good. That seems like that's what the state would like to spend its money on. So, I want to thank both of you very much for making yourself available, for coming to us today. This committee relies upon the testimony that you give to be not only leading edge, but part of what your service is to this great body. We want to thank you very much, and this panel is now excused.
Thank you.
The chairman would note that we are minutes before a vote. I would like to advise the committee that I would anticipate and expect that we would be back around 7:30. Would anticipate we would be back at 7:30 for the finishing of the not only the motion amendment but also the votes that would be necessary. So we'll be waiting until that. So subject to call the chair, we are now in recess. It'll be in order, and thank you very much for allowing us the time to finish the testimony this afternoon on H.R. 2410, Ag Appropriations, H.R. 1613, OCS Agreements, H.R. 2231, Offshore Energy and Jobs Act. And we are back, and I thank the members for coming back after votes. Chair will now be in receipt of a motion from the gentlewoman from Grandfather, North Carolina.
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee grant H.R. 1613, the Outer Continental Shelf Transboundary Hydrocarbon Agreements Authorization Act, a structured rule. The rule provides 1 hour debate, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Natural Resources. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule provides that the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on Natural Resources, now printed, shall be considered as in the bill shall be considered as adopted, and the bill, as amended, shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against provisions in the bill as amended. The rule makes an order only the further amendment printed in Part A of the Rules Committee report if offered by Representative Grayson of Florida. The amendment shall be considered as read, shall be separately debatable for 10 minutes, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. The rule waives all points of order against the amendment printed in Part A of the report. The rule provides one motion to recommit with or without instructions. Section 2 of the rule provides for consideration of H.R. 2231, the Offshore Energy and Jobs Act, under a structured rule. The rule provides 1 hour of general debate, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Natural Resources. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule makes an order as original text for purpose of amendment, an amendment in the nature of a substitute consisting of the text of Rules Committee Print 113-16, and provides that it shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against the amendment in the nature of a substitute. The rule makes an order only those further amendments printed in Part B of the Rules Committee report. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. The rule waives all points of order against the amendments printed in Part B of the report. The rule provides one motion to recommit with or without instructions. Section 3 of the rule provides consideration of H.R. 2410, the Agriculture, Rural Development, Food and Drug Administration and Related Agencies Appropriations Act 2014 under an open rule. The rule provides 1 hour general debate, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Appropriations. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule waives points of order against provisions in the bill for failure to comply with Clause 2 of Rule 21, except as follows. Section 17, Section 8718, the words, quote, or any other, end quote, on page 64, line 13. The words, quote, or any other, end quote, on page 65, line 9, and Section 740. The rule provides that the bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. The rule authorizes the chair to accord priority in recognition to members who have pre-printed their amendments in the congressional record. The rule provides one motion to recommit with or without instructions. Section 4 of the rule provides that on any legislative day during the period from June 29, 2013 through July 5, 2013, the journal of the proceedings of the previous day shall be considered as approved, and the chair may at any time declare the House adjourned to meet at a date and time to be announced by the chair in declaring the adjournment. Section 5 provides that the Speaker may appoint members to perform the duties of the chair for the duration of the period addressed by Section 4 of the resolution. Section 6 of the rule provides for consideration of concurrent resolutions providing for adjournment during the month of July. Finally, Section 7 of the rule provides that the Committee on Appropriations may, at any time before 6 p.m. on Wednesday, July 3, 2013, file privilege reports to accompany measures making appropriations for the fiscal year ending September 30, 2014.
Gentlewoman, the Vice Chair of the Committee has now placed the motion before the committee, and I would now like to yield to myself to explain the bill, the motion that is before us. H.R. 2410, the Ag Appropriations, is a motion for open rule that provides for 1 hour general debate controlled by Committee on Appropriations. The rule also exposes several provisions requested by the Committee on Agriculture to points of order. H.R. 1613, the OCS agreements. We're going to consider H.R. 1613 under a structured rule. Committee only received 5 amendments, 1 of which was withdrawn and 3 of which had points of order. Accordingly, the rule makes the single remaining Democrat amendment in order. And lastly, H.R. 2231, offshore energy and jobs. H.R. 2231 will be considered under a structured rule. Of the 2 amendments received, the rule makes in order amendments. Thank you very much. Strike that. I will start over. Strike. Of the 22 amendments received, the rule makes in order 11 amendments, 4 from Democratic sponsors and 7 from Republican sponsors. And that's an explanation of the motion that lies before us.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Just as a matter of protocol, I'm not certain as to whether or not before we vote it's appropriate, but I would ask unanimous consent. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee had 3 amendments and asked that I offer her statement in support of those 3 amendments, 21, 28, and 217.
Without objection, the gentleman will place in the record, and I thank the gentleman. Further amendments or discussion? Gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment to the rule. I move the committee grant H.R. 1613 and H.R. 2231 open rules so the members have the opportunity to offer amendments to the bill on the floor.
Thank you very much. You've heard the amendment by the gentlewoman, the ranking member, Mrs. Slaughter, and the chairman would offer the advice on his behalf to his members that I believe that this is a fair and open process, and I'm delighted with the rule that we proposed. Further debate or discussion. All those in favor of the Slaughter amendment, see if I have the same. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. No. Noes have it. Noes have it. Further discussion or amendment. Seeing none, the vote is now on the motion by the gentlewoman, the vice chairman of the committee, gentlewoman Mrs. Fox. Those in favor of the Fox motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
No.
The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Mr. Bishop will be the manager for Republicans.
Mr. Hastings for the Democrats.
And the gentleman, Judge Hastings, will be for the Democrats. The next meeting that I'd like to announce so that we are all thinking alike is that we're watching activity in the Senate. We're watching activity in the Senate, and we're watching activity that may come our direction. We do not have another meeting other than that scheduled for this week. Anything further? We're now in recess. I'm sorry. We're now excused for the day. Recess. My